Well, we're going to continue the conversation about the draft. It's all going to take place on April 24th. That's when it begins. Teams looking to fill in holes this offseason in the draft. Really a perfect opportunity to get some young talent all week long. We're looking at each division and top draft needs today, focused on the NFC West. Mike Renner and Bryant McFadden back with us to talk about this upcoming draft and the needs for the NFC West. We're going to start with the 49ers. They have the 11th overall pick. Now, they could use some more depth behind Nick Bosa. There's some turnover in the secondary over there. Maybe someone to help protect Purdy. Where do you think that they need to look?
I think they need to look defensive line, specifically in the draft, because that's where you find the real impact guys. 3 of John Lynch's 4 first-round picks were along the defensive line. That's where he invested early, and without the first-rounders in recent years after that Trey Lance trade, that's where they've kind of regressed. Last year was probably their worst defensive line in years. After Nick Bosa went down, they really did not generate much in the way of pressure, and this is a deep defensive end class. Put all that together, and I'd be really surprised if pick 11 isn't one of these defensive ends in this draft class.
Well, for me, I'm on the opposite side. The offensive line is the way to go for me with the San Francisco 49ers, and here's why. Their best offensive lineman, Trent Williams, he's still an outstanding player, but he's 36 years old. He's dealt with injuries in past seasons as well. So now it's about trying to add some depth and, most importantly, talent to that unit, because outside of Trent Williams, we saw inconsistencies surface throughout that offensive line. So me personally, trying to get the best out of your quarterback along with your entire offense, it's all about getting prepared to move on from Trent Williams at some point in time whenever he decides to call it quits. When you look at the talent that could be there available, you can go get you an athletic, outstanding tackle at the 11th pick. So offensive line will be the position for me to go when it comes to the San Francisco 49ers.
All right, let's talk about the Cardinals, because on defense, on that side, it could look very, very different come the upcoming season. They have a lot of impending free agents. They also have a lot of money to spend, which is certainly helpful. They're picking 16th overall, though. So how would they address that if it's, for the draft and they're not going to be spending all that money elsewhere in free agency?
Yeah, I think, again, defensive line super deep. The position I'm looking at for them, though, is defensive tackle, because they have some options on the edge. They traded for Baron Browning midseason. I expect them to re-sign him with how he played down the stretch for them. But they don't have options at defensive tackle. Their entire defensive tackle unit last year combined for fewer pressures than Chris Jones. That entire room, like 8 guys, had fewer pressures than Chris Jones. That's how inept they were at attacking the passer. You can get by with kind of the no-name defense they have in the secondary. You can't get by with a no-name defense along the defensive line. We saw that in Philly and how they won the Super Bowl. So if you're Arizona, that's where I'm looking. I'd love a guy like Kenneth Grant out of Michigan to start resetting the tone of that front 7.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on the defensive side, but I go edge rusher. You look at the ability for an individual to win one-on-one matchups in their defense. They don't really have that in terms of talent and potential. So being able to find a way to put pressure on opposing quarterbacks, not utilizing blitz concepts, could really do wonders for their entire defense on all 3 levels. So me personally, when you look at the edge defenders that we believe will be outstanding pressure-like players in the National Football League, that would improve their defense. When you look at Mikael Williams, he could potentially be available there for the Cardinals to select. If he's there, that's a guy you cannot pass on, because he's shown the ability to win one-on-one matchups and be overly disruptive in the running game as well. And, of course, his teammate, Jalen Walker, could be available as well. So I would love to see one of those Bulldogs, former Bulldogs, hearing their name called in the first round by the Cardinals.
The Cards also doubled their win total. They were sitting in first place in the NFC West in mid-November, and then everything kind of dropped off. But put in some good players in the right spots. You never know what's going to happen in that division. We're going to talk about the Seahawks next. So Geno Smith entering his final year of his contract. Team's most pressing needs, some might say it's on the O-line over there. 18th overall pick. Where do you go?
I'm going interior offensive line. They had one of, if not the worst interior offensive line in the NFL last year. They combined for 116 pressures. That's almost 40 pressures per player up front. It's almost 3 a game. That's not good if you are trying to be Geno Smith and lead a passing attack, which obviously why it was so up and down last year. Now, going from Ryan Grubbs at OC to Clint Kubiak, he's going to protect that offensive line better, but they're going to run the ball more. And to run the ball, usually they need an offensive line still. So I'm looking at interior offensive line. Obviously, probably not with that first overall pick. The only guy I would consider there, Tyler Booker out of Alabama. After that, you're probably looking into day 2 for a tackle to guard convert, but good Lord, did they need help along that offensive line.
Well, for me, hey, Mike, I was going back and forth, O-line, D-line, O-line, D-line. Well, I'm going to take the defensive line, and here's why. Their head coach, Mike McDonald, guess what? He's a defensive play caller. Yeah. So clearly there could be some bias there, and that actually would help their team in terms of finding a way to be more consistent on the defensive side, going to get you a guy that can put pressure on opposing quarterbacks and play stout and run support as well. So when you look at Mike Macdonald and the way how he utilizes his defensive linemen, moving them around, look at Derek Hall, second-year player. His rookie year, 2023, had 0 sacks. Under Mike Macdonald, he had 8 sacks. So let's say a guy like Shamar Stewart is there for the Seattle Seahawks. You do not pass on a guy like that who can be a plug-and-play player instantly in your defense. He improves the entire defense, and now you talk about a guy that can be a mainstay for your organization for a decade plus based on his skill set and his potential. And I really would love to see Mike Macdonald being able to work with a guy like Shamar Stewart, who didn't give you the sacks at A&M that we believe he should have provided. But with this system and the coaching that he would receive there in Seattle, the sky would be the limit. Only if he is available for the Seattle Seahawks when it's time for them to make that pick.
All right, last and certainly not least, we're going to talk about the Rams because I feel like this conversation could change depending on what happens in the coming weeks. We know Matt Stafford, his agent, has been given permission to speak to other teams, see what else is out there. Cooper Kupp also on the trading block. They're picking 26 overall. What is the direction based off of all of that?
Yeah, I mean, quarterback would obviously rise to the top should they trade Matt Stafford, but I do think it's wide receiver because they will be trading or releasing Cooper Kupp. That just leaves Puka Nacua. Now, Jordan Whittington was nice for a 6th rounder. He's not your second wide receiver next to Puka Nacua. He's not replacing what Cooper Kupp did in that offense. I think the dream scenario for them is Emeka Egbuka, the Ohio State wide receiver, falling, because not only is he an NFL-ready route runner, not only is he a guy who gets after in the run game and can block, but he has speed. This offense lacks high-end juice down the football field from one of those top 3 wide receivers. Emeka Egbuka probably going to run the low 4.4s. He does that. He might go higher than 26, but if he's out to Rams pick at 26, he should be the pick, in my opinion.
Well, for me, I go defensive side, the secondary cornerback. When you look at what we saw last year, they really outkicked their coverage. They played really, really well. But it's time to add some more young talent to that position group. You look at Fuller, he did fairly well, but Ahkello Witherspoon is getting up there in age. So it's about going ahead and to provide some insurance in terms of depth and a youthful movement. And when you look at the Rams, one thing that we're starting to see about the Los Angeles Rams, Sean McVay and Les Snead, Tallahassee has been great to them. So I can easily see Les Snead going back to Florida State and going to get a guy by the name of A.Z. Thomas to add to their defense. When you look at Jerry Verse, Florida State, great year. Braden Fish, Florida State, great year. So let's go back to the well and see if any more water is left in that well. And there's a lot of water left in the well when you look at A.Z. Thomas. He went down to Mobile, was locked down, 6'2", 190, very, very nimble, play with great eyes. He's ball aware. He tackles with the right angles, and he just loves to compete in one-on-one situations. And I believe if they're able to get him at 26, he could potentially be a day 1 starter instantly upon arrival there in Los Angeles.
Former Gator over here was making quite the face when you mentioned
You know how it goes, B-Mac. You know, you were going corner, FSU. I had to watch, like, FSU highlights, even though, you know, we're better than you this season. It doesn't matter.
They didn't have many last year, though.
Exactly. We were, we were diving into the archives to find the highlights. But for this guy, they were worth it.
Took a left turn over here. Mike Renner, Bryant McFadden.
Go Gators, baby.
Appreciate you both here. The NFC draft needs out there in the West.
Yeah, we're looking at the NFC West teams, their odds to win the Super Bowl, and this was the division that was, we kept calling it the wild NFC West because there was a new division leader almost every other week in the middle of the season. The Niners, though, still sitting at the top at 12-1 in terms of the division, and of course that all depends if they can stay healthy.
After the break, we're talking baseball. Does an ace matter more than depth? How many pitchers are enough? Matt Snyder answering those questions and more on the other side.